In our last talk, we explored the architecture of consciousness. We discovered that awakening is not the end of the journey, it is the completion of one part of it. But as I reflected on everything, one question kept returning, a question I simply couldn't ignore. Why does physical intelligence stop exactly where humanity stands? If evolution has carried life from its simplest beginnings through every stage of increasing complexity, why does it end with us? Why doesn't it continue? At first I assumed it probably did, that somewhere far beyond humanity, physical intelligence simply carried on evolving. It seemed the most natural conclusion. But the longer I sat with that possibility, the more uneasy I became. Because if physical intelligence really could continue beyond the human condition, something else would also have to happen. Something I have never observed. And once I realized that, everything changed. I began to wonder whether the human condition is not simply another step within evolution, but a boundary. Not a biological boundary, a cosmological one. A boundary between one complete reality and another. Before we explore why, one clarification matters. When I speak of a physical window, I am not describing our planet or even our galaxy. I am describing the complete virtual reality through which consciousness is expressed throughout this universe. Every form of life that shares this universe shares the same window. And if the human condition really is the trailing edge of that window, then understanding why physical intelligence stops here may also explain why universes themselves remain distinct. That is the journey I would like us to explore. To understand why physical intelligence cannot continue beyond the human condition, we first need to understand what happens when enlightenment is complete. As we explored in the last talk, awakening begins when the self is gradually displaced from the center of our life. The filter naturally continues to fall. The ego continues to resist. It draws us away from the present moment, because only in the present moment can self give way to selflessness. This is where the human spirit becomes so important. It is the one place where free will exists, the one place where consciousness can choose between self and selflessness. Every moment of genuine presence allows the self to loosen a little more. Every act of selflessness allows divine intelligence to express itself more freely. Peace deepens, compassion deepens, love deepens, not because we have become more intelligent, but because less of consciousness is being filtered through the self. Eventually, a remarkable threshold is reached. Divine intelligence now exceeds physical intelligence. The unfiltered stands above the filtered. This is not an arbitrary moment. It is the completion of enlightenment within this window. Absolute consciousness has doubled. To picture what happens next, it helps to return to the image of the wheel. Until now, the wheel has lain horizontal. While it remained horizontal, the work belonged to consciousness. Now the wheel itself has changed. Its circumference has doubled. And for the first time, it rises upright and begins to turn. From this moment onward, absolute consciousness no longer expands. Its journey within this window is complete. Now, physical intelligence begins its own journey. not because consciousness is still growing, but because physical intelligence must now grow until it can fully express the consciousness that already exists. And that is where our question returns. If physical intelligence can begin another evolutionary journey, why does it always stop at the human condition? Let's imagine for a moment that physical intelligence did not stop at the human condition. Let's imagine it simply continued to evolve. At first, that feels like the obvious conclusion. After all, if evolution has always moved towards greater intelligence, why should it suddenly stop? But now let's look at where that idea takes us. The journey we have just described does not end with this window. It continues into those that follow. As our wheel turns, we pass through successive windows. Within each one, our journey of evolution continues until eventually, after half a rotation, our wheel rests horizontal once again. What was once the leading edge has become the trailing edge. But now something has changed. Physical intelligence has evolved from 0 to 2. Once again, it captures our absolute conscious state in full. And once again, awakening begins. Absolute consciousness expands. The cycle repeats. But now imagine that physical intelligence did not stop at 2. Imagine it simply continued to rise. What would happen? It would not continue into empty space, nor would it create another form of life within that universe. Instead, it would begin to enter the window we have just left, and something extraordinary would follow. The physical intelligence of that neighboring universe would become sufficient to fully ignite the absolute conscious states that within our universe appear as less complex life forms. The simplest expressions of life would awaken first, then those beyond them, then those beyond them still. A gradual tide of enlightenment would move through the entire architecture of this universe. Plants, animals, apes, human beings. Every conscious state would progressively awaken until the whole window stood enlightened. But this is not the universe we inhabit. We do not observe a rising wave of enlightenment moving through the living world. The architecture remains intact. And because we do not observe that collapse, we arrive at the remarkable conclusion. Physical intelligence does not continue beyond the trailing edge of any window. Not because evolution has failed, but because every window must preserve the integrity of the one that came before and the one that follows. Perhaps the simplest way to picture all of this is to imagine a great canal system. Each canal exists at its own level. Each one is complete within itself. And between each level stands a lock. At first glance, the locks appear to be barriers, but they are not. They are there to preserve the order of the entire system. Imagine for a moment that one lock no longer worked. The water from the higher canal would immediately begin to pour into the one below. The two levels would slowly become one, then another, and then another. Very quickly, the whole canal system would lose its structure. The locks do not prevent the journey. They make the journey possible. I believe the windows of consciousness work in much the same way. Each window is a complete reality, a complete universe, a complete expression of consciousness. Every window contains its own living world, its own interconnectedness, its own quality of peace, its own well-being, its own expression of love. The boundary does not exist to separate universes. It exists to preserve the integrity of each one. Only when the journey through one window is complete does the next begin. Only when absolute consciousness has fully expanded does the wheel rise upright and begin to turn. Only then does physical intelligence begin its next evolutionary journey. One complete universe giving rise to another. One complete window following another, never collapsing into the one that came before. Perhaps that is why physical intelligence stops exactly where it does. Not because human beings are the highest form of life, but because the human condition marks the trailing edge of one complete reality and the leading edge of another. The boundary is not there to prevent evolution. It is there to preserve the order through which consciousness awakens, window by window, universe by universe. And perhaps that is the greatest inversion of all. What appears to be a limit is actually an act of protection. Not protecting one species, not protecting one world, but protecting the extraordinary order through which consciousness continues its endless journey. When I look at the universe through that lens, I no longer see a collection of separate lives. I see one continuous unfolding, an architecture in which every universe, every window, every life, and every act of genuine selflessness plays its part in the expression of consciousness itself. Perhaps that has been the journey we've been exploring all along.